trim this off, but let's leave it on until after we make a few cuts. Then we can decide we're going to cut that off completely. All right, so chicken is a bit of a, I don't know what you call them, a little bit of a redneck, I guess, right? So they have cut off shorts and then tank tops usually. So all they're missing is a little can of a beverage that, you know, straight in, right? So
why are you playing it like a toy?
Anyway, I say that because I want to tell you that the chicken itself is designed with muscle groups. So each little thing is muscles. And muscles are made up of fibers. Well, groups of muscles are called muscle groups. So that's where you get the breasts, the legs, the thighs. They're groups of muscles together. They do one thing, right? So the muscles that make this chicken's wings go up and down, that's a muscle group. Now, when we separate this chicken into pieces, usually there's lines. So you can see fat lines, seams and stuff. A lot of times those are the indicators that's where we're cutting. And you'll see that more when you look in on the meats, there's lines. And I'll show you that when we tear this thing open. But whenever I address the chicken, we start with the head away on the back, and then just kind of make sure all that skin is nice, and that you don't have any crazy broken wings or any of that. If you're doing a competition, and if you do that, tell the judge and try to get a different chicken.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if they don't have another chicken, they just may not count you off for that. All right, we got the inside pretty clean. You can see all the ribs, and it's not like puddles of stuff or juice sticking everywhere. The neck area is pretty clear. There's no big globs of fat. Sometimes right here with the skirt, there's attached big white blobs of fat. And that fat kind of goes up here to protect this chicken, because you know chickens lay on eggs. Yeah? So that goes there to help keep the eggs warm. So they do have kind of a fat bottom. So anyway, we're going to make sure all that skin and stuff seems right. And then what I like to start with is making 2 cuts across these lines.
Okay. Those white lines.
Yeah, kind of on those 2 lines. And we're just going to open this up so we can look.
No, that's not.
And so, that's all right. They'll all call it if we need it. So we're going to cut right through there. And right through here.
So you didn't cut on the line, you cut like this like this.
Yeah, it's just close. All right, now there's a good one. So once we open that up, these thighs and legs can lay down flat. Then you have this skirt inside, right? It's not skin, it's not really meat. It's just a membrane almost. That's just there to help protect organs. And we're going to cut right through that as well. So we're just going to open that up. See that?
Yeah, I didn't see how you cut it.
So we just cut right through.
Okay, it doesn't really
Not
matter
specific, we're not going to use that stuff anyway. And you can kind of see now if you look inside ribs.
Where. Yeah.
So those ribs are what we're going to trace when we remove the 2 pieces of breast meat. Now chickens are asymmetrical, so they're the same on both sides. If you were to cut this chicken in half like this, you'd have a breast, a wing, a thigh, a leg. A breast, a wing, a thigh, and a leg. On each side they're the same. So they're mirror images. So
Like a spider.
what I'm going to show you first is, let's go ahead and pull that down. That way we can see in there real good. Now, there are these 2 little sets of bones, see if you can see them, right here. See those?
Yeah.
Right here. Right? So they kind of make this little basket here whenever that chicken was still together. All right, so what I want to do first is remove my leg quarters. So if you cut a chicken into 4 sections, you'd have a breast, a wing, a leg, a thigh, a leg, a thigh.
Yeah.
Right? Technically, it's a drum and a thigh. This is the whole leg. But anyway, I want to remove 1 leg quarter. So what I want to do first is dislocate its hips. So I want to take its hip bones and pull them out of socket. So that way I can get my knife in between the 2 spots and cut the whole section off. But before I do that, I'm going to take care of this backbone. So right here along the middle of the back, on that line, there, right below that, you see two kind of lobes.
Yeah.
Right? Those are what they call the chicken oysters. They're these tiny little like thumb-sized chunks of meat, real tender, real flavorful, but they're very hard to get to. So sometimes you see them on manufactured commercial chicken, sometimes you don't. But if you do it yourselves, you're always guaranteed you can get those off and save them because they're tasty. And then what I like to do is cut right down the back. Just make sure that's open. So chickens, just like us, have a spine, a backbone that goes down its back. And we're going to try to stay on the outsides of that spine to remove the other stuff. So what's left here will be spine and then a little bit of that lower rib cage area down there at the bottom. So leg bone goes up, then hits the thigh bone, goes over, and then connects to its
So you're gonna
pelvis.
dislocate it there.
So I'm going to push with my middle fingers here. I'm going to push down, but like that, right? I'm going to flip it over so you guys can kind of see. Hopefully you can see, like from here to here, that's the bone in there. So right here is the socket. For you guys right here
Okay.
is the socket. So I'm going to do like that to dislocate, because this is natural motion. So I'm going to go past natural and then dislocate, right? So do one first, so right here. And if you listen, you can hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so right there.
Right there.
And then on this one, right here, you'll be able to hear it. See that?
Or see it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, so now what we're going to do is flip this baby back over,
Not a big.
and then we're going to go ahead and cut right through that layer of fat. And then we're going to try to find that oyster muscle. So right here is where it is. And if you kind of, if we pull his pants down a little bit, you can kind of see right here, these little
Yeah.
sections right there. It's kind of soft and pillowy looking. That's one of those parts we're going to try to remove. So let's remove this one first. And then let's start along the top and then kind of come down this backbone. And every time you make a little slit, it should open up some. So make that little slit, and then you start to see more and more get exposed. So right here is where we start to see that oyster get separated. So if you look right in there, you see that real nice, smooth pelvis muscle.
Yeah.
There's a little membrane on it. If we can see, we cut through that, and you can see just how smooth
Oh,
that
yeah.
is. Okay? See that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what that oyster sits on.
Look
That
at people in
smooth
some way.
pelvis.
Recording you. Oh. Hi, Red.
So you can take your thumb,
You're part of the
go
chicken
in
cutting
like that,
process.
and loosen it. Once that's loosened,
Haley.
okay, once that's loosened and free, we're going to take the knife and go under that oyster, and then in between where the bone and the hips meet, and then follow down the backbone. Okay, so knife pointing toward you, right? So you can kind of see under that oyster. Here's the oyster right there, pretty much still intact. And then making a little trim, and then you can see here's the bone, right? So going between the bone and the socket, but under the oyster. So try to have to come up a little, and then kind of don't just angle the knife flat, but kind of toward the backbone. You don't want to cut into the backbone, but you want it to kind of guide along. So right down to the end. Okay. So
And then
get his
smooth it
pants
out.
pulled back up and set it here on our ice. So that's a drum and a thigh, leg quarter. And you can kind of see that's your half.
And this works just as well as an ice bath at keeping it cool.
Yeah. Ideally, you'd want more ice so the chicken sits right on it, but it's melted a little bit. Yeah, that would be a good thing to have, just like that. Or even Ziploc bags full of ice work. Anyway, okay, so that's one. And you can kind of see this half here. That's your backbone right there. And then there's just that tiny bit of meat that we kind of left on the thing. But other than that, we got all the thigh off. Now I'm gonna turn it the other side
Okay.
and then do it. And if you see these mucusy looking
Is it like
stringy
membrane?
things, just kind of clear them away. Use those paper towels or your dry towel or something. And then we want to get around that oyster right there the same. Let's find it. Here's the top of it. So let's cut it around. And then push it in. And put it here. Just tiny little cuts just to open it up. Okay, so right there you see the smooth bone starting to show.
Yep.
Take your thumb and you should be able to
Push it
release
off,
that
yeah.
oyster away. Just kind of release it. And this is why I wear gloves, is because I don't like all that stuff getting underneath my fingernails.
Yeah. No.
And I wear 2 gloves because if I get one and it's a little nasty, I can pull the top layer off and I have some pretty clean gloves still that I can work with.
I'm gonna wear 3 gloves.
Just to be
8.
that
Still
much.
have a little bit exterior. Okay, so that's still together. Once it comes down, we find that socket, right, where that was in. And we're going under the oyster and in between the socket. And then back down to the backbone and down. So under the oyster, through the socket, and then down the backbone. So we've gone under the oyster.
Under the oyster.
Right. We want to stay right on that backbone, so slight back and forth motions. Now here was our socket.
Yep. Right by the socket.
So the knife came through that socket.
Okay.
Now we're going to angle it back towards the backbone.
Yep.
Okay. Back towards the backbone. And then come down. And you can see this piece of meat right here.
Yeah.
Hug that fat line. Talk about these fat lines. Hug that fat line.
Okay.
Okay. So there's your other
Has
thigh.
no legs. Looks like a. It's a quadruple leech.
And then you pull his
It
pants
looks like
back
a
up.
skull with elf ears, like demon ears.
Looks like
Set
a
'em there.
cripple.
We'll show you how to break those down further in a second. But these little snotty things.
I feel like the wings are the easiest part.
Oh yeah, the wings are easy, but
Okay. Let's do that. See them?
Gross.
you
It's
legit
like
just top
sinew.
it. You legit just
Yeah,
top
sinew.
between
Socket.
a knife and a.
And then these dry towels and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Wipe off your
Like your arm
board.
right here, you basically cut the elbow.
Wipe off any of this juice so that way you don't end up with big messes. Okay, so now we got that part taken off. Let's focus on the rest of the wings.
With it slapped down on the ground.
So the same thing here. We've got, these appendages that have movement.
Are these swimming?
Now with the competition, most of the time they want you to turn in what's called an airline chicken breast, or a French chicken breast, which means you take the wing and you leave the drumette bone, the first joint bone, attached, and then you remove the midsection and the tip. So whenever you do that, you can kind of see on this side of the wing, there's one bone here and then 2 here. You've eaten wings before, there's usually 2 pieces of wings you get. One's the flat, one's the drummy, right? So flat's got 2 bones, this has 1. So where they connect, that's where we're going to separate.
Okay.
And how we're going to do that is first we're going to French this first bone section. So we're going to hold our chicken by the midpoint, and then we're going to pull this knife around the single bone, like that. And once we go all the way through the bone, we're going to rake up and down the bone to clean it up. Okay? So, and you can kind of see this is the main amount of muscle here. So from about here down is what you're going to keep and push down. The rest of this is going to be taken off up here. Okay? We don't want to cut the bone, we just want to cut to the bone. So we come around, and then stick it this way. And then you can take the back flat side of your knife and up and down.
things don't want to dull your knife.
Yeah, that way you don't end up ruining the cutting edge of your knife. So up and down helps get that bone clean. Now it has natural movement that way. So to dislocate it, you go the natural movement the other direction. So you pull it backwards,
That
right?
noise.
So then you have clean bone
Yep.
that's been trimmed off, and then you have your wings midsection and its tip. But we want to remove this. So whenever you're holding the wing, you can kind of use your fingers on both sides, and as it goes up and down, you can feel, because there's going to be two bones on one part and one on another. And as they move, you can feel where that connection is. And that's where you want to cut right through that section, right?
Okay.
The sound of bone scraping.
Alright, so a little bit of cartilage, but that's okay. You got one wing mid, one tip, and then our entrails. So you want to show off the fact that you know how to do it. So that's why everything's going to stay up here on ice, so that if while they're walking around looking at you, they can tell a difference. So now this one goes the same way. Alright, so get a good purchase, and then pull your knife. Different directions. And then using the back side, the flat of your knife, to go up and down. Okay.
What is that?
Chicken.
What is that chicken?
Alright, so you remember
Yep.
if it falls that way, we're going the opposite, right? So make sure you hold this because you don't want the bone to break. But you just pull backwards.
Okay.
And then it should have pretty
It's got
good
little
clean
nub
bone.
arms now.
If you don't do that, scraping here backwards, then this stuff like that, stretchy membrane, is really visible, and then as it dries and browns, it looks gross and yucky, right? So, let's take that back over the side, and then find our joint. It's there, and then always that skin, if you can, just pull it back down around your chicken, so that way it looks neat. Okay. Now let's tackle the last part, which is removing the breast with this bone still intact. So these wing bones connect to one more bone that connects to the backbone. So there's a bone that goes up this way and connects here. So we want to try to work our way around that. And one of the easier ways to do that is for us to remove this wishbone first. So you know what the wishbone is?
Yeah.
See, that's like that kind of V, and it's right here. On us, it would be like our clavicle, right, our collarbone. But in here, you can kind of see, once again, if you look at the fat lines, there's one light colored line that goes up and down right there. See it? This direction. See that? It goes that way and that way. And if you use your fingers, you can feel it easily. Like I can feel exactly where that is. So just take your knife and you just make a little draw just to open up that muscle enough for that wishbone to kind of stick out. Okay, so right here where my finger is, you can see. You see where that cut is? Okay. And if you can, like, it's hanging right now from that bone, and if you can just grab that bone, work your fingers up and down both sides of it, and you just kind of get that meat to start to release. See it in there?
Yeah, I see it.
You guys see it? And once you do that, you just continually do that, using your thumb to kind of apply pressure up and around. And work all the way down to the bottom, and then it comes off, right?
Yeah.
So you just keep going kind of down, pushing pressure, and then eventually it's going to come out of its socket down here. And then we're going to do the other side. So let's draw our little line. then here it is, fingers in there with it. And up and down along that bone right there. And just kind of push up and down. And you don't want to break this wishbone. So you just keep applying pressure down.
You don't
So
try and bend it.
you're kind of doing that. And then eventually it comes out at the bottom. So now you can see both ends.
Yeah.
Right? And it's kind of like a fork almost. If you follow it all the way up to the top, where the tip of my finger is, right here, and then you can clean it off with your finger. You just kind of keep pulling it backwards. Careful not to break it because it's a pretty weak bone. And you just move your fingers around it. Eventually the meat will subside and then you can take that out of there. Can you see in there?
Yeah.
And you pull upwards.
Well, all the snaps and cracks so didn't you?
Smells like Rice Krispies.
So there's your wishbone.
You gotta let you eat it. Don't just hand it to me.
Okay. Now that that's out of the way, we can actually get our knife to go straight through and come down. Now there's a bone here in between these two breast lobes. And it's kind of like a fin, right? It's kind of like that. So what we're going to do is draw a line with our knife down the center and open it up a little bit, and our knife will just kind of naturally go to one side or the other. Whatever side it starts with, that's the side we're going to start with.
Okay.
So make sure your skin's right, because if you're serving a skin-on breast, you want it to cover as much of the meat as possible. You don't want it to look all goofy and have like a strip of skin over a piece of meat, right? So right in the center, and then kind of holding that in place, just draw straight down. You can kind of see right here where that red is.
Yeah.
That's where that bone is on that side. So our knife's gonna want to go on this side. So just kind of do a little bit. We're gonna open it up. This is where our wishbone was attached, that red spot. Now this bone in the center here is called the keel bone. Kind of like the keel board on a boat. You know, it sticks down on the bottom of the boat and keeps the boat from tipping over. Same thing, it looks very similar, just kind of this straight line. So anyway, open that up. And now underneath the breast is the tenderloin. We want to try to keep it connected if we can. We can disconnect it later, but anyway, we're just going to keep doing thin slices. And every time you do a thin little cut, just run your finger or your thumb there in that space that you created, and that just kind of helps make separation. And the more you run a knife blade through, and then run your finger through, a knife blade, finger, and they just continue to separate. If you try to just push through, then you get like store-bought manufactured chicken with bone fragments and things. So we're going to try to do really good. Now as we're coming down, we have our rib cage, right? It's kind of like this. So we're going to want our knife to stay on that rib cage so the meat comes off and the ribs stay intact. We don't want to cut the ribs, but we want to guide along them. Okay? So making little cuts. See, there's your first rib.
Yeah.
So make just little cuts. Holding that knife there. You can see it. Then there'll be another one. So you just keep making these little cuts. And every time you make a little one, you just remove more and more and more. See how that's working? So these are your ribs, and we want to keep coming up. Around. Keep doing that too. All right, so that's mainly all the breast. It's still attached up here at the top. Now this is your chicken tenderloin. And then, you know, if you've ever eaten chicken tenders, you know there's like this one little white tendon at the top, right? That's this piece right here. And that's your chicken tender hanging from the top of the ribs. So we're gonna cut right through that. And then that allows us to keep coming down this. So, okay. So here we've got our ribs, and then this is the joint in which we have a bone that connects to our wing bone that's down here. So this is where it gets kind of hard to tell where you're at. So if you can grab like this, all of this we want to come off together and leave this, okay? So we need to cut where my hand is without separating. So this bone, you can kind of see here, that's the end of it there. We want to go in through that joint to take off the rest of this, okay? So I come back on this side and cut this skin so that I can get a little bit better look at what we're doing. Come right through here. All right. You guys see that? Right at the base of that. So we're going to want to try to cut right through there. And you can see it. Two bones connecting right there. And we're going to just go through that, okay? So all of this through there. Where you can see it. Okay. You want to see it? Where the two bones come together? Right there. So as you're following that down, so back to its original position. That's
Oh,
about
we're struggling.
right. That's about where we started, right?
Yeah.
So all that's left is this one piece. So we got this guy taken off, and then, like I was saying before, this is your chicken tender. And then that white piece there is your piece that would connect here. See it?
Yeah.
So that's what holds that on. Now it's just kind of held on by a few little membranes and things. But for now, we're going to keep that intact for scoring. So they can come by and look at that. Chicken tender's intact. Skin pretty well covers most of the meat. Okay? French bone, everything's pretty good there. We can clean that up in a minute. Let's remove this other one. Now this is where it's going to get a little difficult, and this is why that video you watched showed you to start with the breast, because this part's tricky to do like this, but you just have to
I did the best last.
do it very carefully. Okay? So you got that little piece of fat there in the bottom. That's going to get cut off anyway, so don't worry about that thing.
He also tells you that.
Alright, so this is the keel. And now as you see, in that video he made a big deal about this being a curve here, right? So it's a curve kind of like your thumb fits in that circle. So we're going to remove some of that connection. And then whenever this comes off, we've saved a little bit of the meat that we can out of there.
Okay.
So just keep tracing down that bone.
So is it easier when like the first breast is off?
Yeah, it's more stable, but you can still do it. So every time you're pulling down, you just kind of hold it still, and you're just still tracing those ribs, right? And if you're right-handed or left-handed, one side's going to be a little bit harder than the other. Does that make sense? Which is why I started going this way on this side, and I'm going this way on this side. So I'm kind of going at it from a little bit different angle. There's our bone. There's our tendon. Make our cut through it. Come back to this side. And it should be easier doing the second one here because it's much more easier to move around. Just come to that joint. Don't worry about getting a little bit extra here. We can trim that. And then you just remove those two bones. So these are two bones, and that's the joints we cut. So we don't have a whole lot of meat, but there's some meat here left. A little bit of stick to your rib stuff. But otherwise, that is your chicken's carcass. So this is roasted and made into stock or just boiled into stock. Anyway.
Yeah, I boiled mine anyway.
So if you take this and put it right in cold water and make stock, it's white chicken stock or clear chicken stock. If you put this in the oven and let it brown and then put it in water, you get a browner chicken stock. So sometimes you get a little bit more depth of flavor out of doing that. But you don't get that clear chicken broth that you want to use in a lot of things.
So, clear chicken broth, you boil it?
Yeah, you're just going to boil the bones. You're not going to roast them first. All right, so here's a little bit of extra skin. We can just cut that off. We can save it as some of our scrap stuff. Bone comes down. All right. So there's our
Competition's in June, right?
April.
April?
Yeah. All right. So this one also has our tenderloin.
If you weren't explaining to us all the steps and everything, how long do you think it would take you to fabricate a chicken?
Me?
Yes, like how
10
fast?
Because they
10,
give
10
us
minutes if I want to do a really good job.
They gave us 30. They gave us like 40 minutes.
You get
30.
45 minutes. So if you can do it in 20, that gives you 25 minutes to do other things. So just because that's what you have to get done during a time limit doesn't mean that's the only thing you're allowed to do.
I know.
You can do all the stuff that you
Doesn't
want.
stock take like 4 hours to make?
Stock, you want to have it cooking as long as possible.
Yeah.
So as soon as you get this chicken done and scored, get these bones in the water and get it going, because that's going to be your soup and your broth for your braising liquid. You guys know why this is called a keel bone? Did I already tell you about the boat?
Yeah.
Oh, and then you do.
Oh, okay.
All right. Put that in.